At the family group, my dad typed, "We think it's best you step away for now." Then he hit send. Everyone laughed. My cousin dropped a LOL. My brother added crying emojis. Even my mom piled on. I stared at the screen, typed back, "Understood. I'll respect that." Then I logged in and shut down the family fund I had carried on my back for 6 years. At 3:11 a.m., my phone started buzzing. By sunrise, I had 89 missed calls. That was the night everything snapped when I realized I was never family, just their wallet. But before I share my story with you, I'd love to know you're here with me. Drop a simple hi in the comments so I know you're listening, or let me know where you're watching from. I love to see how far my story can reach. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing. Every story I tell comes from a place of pain, survival, and truth. Sometimes all we need is to know we're not alone. My name is Qley, and this is my story. The message came at 7:15 on a Wednesday night. I was sitting in my Wicker Park studio with a sandwich from Al's Beef in my hand, neon bleeding through the blinds, the faint rumble of the CTA running past my window. My phone buzzed, and there it was in the family group chat, my dad's text. "We think it's best you step away for now." Silence in my chest, noise on the screen. One by one, the replies rolled in. My cousin Ren sent LOL. Rowan, my brother, fired off strings of laughing emojis. Even my mom, who had always asked me to be patient, piled on with a ha-ha. I typed back, "Understood. I'll respect that." My hands shook, but I hit send. That should have been the end of it, but my next move was a quiet rebellion. From 8 to nearly 10:30, I sat at my laptop and logged into the family emergency fund, the one I had built and kept alive for 6 years. Line after line of auto-pays stared back at me, my mom's heart medication, the utilities at the Oak Park house, Rowan's recurring credit card minimums. I shut each one down. I downloaded every statement for the last 3 years, each transaction like a scar carved into a ledger. I changed, passwords, locked access, and for the first time since 2019, that account belonged only to me. By 10:45, I opened a blank email to my dad. I didn't write an explanation or an argument. Just one line, "I respect your decision." I transferred the remaining balance to my personal account, saved the confirmation, and sat back in the glow of my monitor. The apartment was still the hum of the AC, slicing through the quiet like cold air through bone. At 3:11 a.m., the stillness shattered. My phone lit up buzz after buzz until it nearly vibrated off the nightstand. By sunrise, there were 89 missed calls. My dad's voicemails were frantic. "Quillian, what did you do?" The bank froze everything. Rowans were furious. "You know I needed that money. Why would you do this?" My mom's voice trembled in hers. "Honey, please, this isn't what we meant." I turned the ringer off and stood by the window. Outside, snow from last week's storm clung to rooftops like it refused to melt, stubborn and brittle, just like us. Somewhere deep down, I knew a line had been crossed. The rules had changed. I hit play on the final voicemail, a stranger's voice. "Your request for co-sign verification is pending. Please confirm your signature." My stomach dropped. My name was out there being used for something I hadn't agreed to. Then the screen went dark. To understand why shutting that account felt like cutting off oxygen, you'd have to know how it began. Back in 2019, Rowan wrecked his motorcycle on the Kennedy. He didn't have insurance. The call came from my dad in a grocery store parking lot, his voice breaking, begging me for help. I was 24, still building a life with 15 grand in savings. I wired all of it to Northwestern Memorial before Rowan even made it out of surgery. I told myself it was temporary, that families help each other when it matters most. But temporary stretched. In 2020, after my dad lost his job, at the steel plant, bills piled up. My mom's prescriptions kept getting more expensive. I agreed to set up an emergency fund in my name. I linked auto-pays, the mortgage, utilities, her meds. Everyone had the login, but I was the only one who ever touched it. I thought it was about structure, about safety. They treated it like a bottomless ATM. By 2021, Rowan had drifted back into old habits. I got the panicked call he owes money at Rivers Casino. Another $5,000 gone, and my dad swore it was the last time. That was the year I started keeping my own spreadsheet tabs for medical utilities bailouts, each row a record of my exhaustion. In 2022, the fund ballooned. I picked up 70-hour weeks at the finance firm to keep the numbers from bleeding red. I downsized from a Lakeview one-bedroom to a studio in Wicker Park. I cut dinners, cut everything that smelled like joy. I told friends I was busy, but really I was just broke from being generous. Every time I said I was fine, I felt thinner, hollower. Early 2023, I noticed something strange, small withdrawals, a couple hundred here and there, labeled vaguely as services. Added up, it was thousands. I flagged them in my spreadsheet, highlighted in red. I should have dug deeper. But peace felt cheaper than confrontation. Then I stumbled on two things I couldn't unsee. One, an old email from 2021 buried in my archive, showed my dad requesting a password reset for the fund from the family email address. When I traced the digital fingerprint, the login came from Rowan's device. They'd been trying to take the keys to the vault long before anyone said the words "step away." And around the same time, an autopay appeared under the name RR Ventures Services. The timing matched when Rowan bragged to me about starting a business. The initials, RR Rowan Rise. I didn't connect the dots then, but looking back, it was the seed of a plan that would nearly wreck me. I wrestled with myself constantly. How much help is love, and when does it cross into enabling? In my family, duty meant plugging holes in a sinking ship. To say no felt like betrayal, but saying yes was turning me into an accomplice in my own ruin. My spreadsheet became my lifeline: rows, columns, color codes, truth captured in numbers. I even kept the hospital invoice from 2019 folded in my desk, the reminder of how this all began. That year, I made my first private, rule no expense over $200 without paperwork. It was my thin, shaky line in the sand. But the universe didn't respect lines. One night, digging through old archives, I found a PDF labeled Payment Authorization. It carried my name, my signature, or at least a scan of it, but I had never signed it. The forgery was clean practiced. I wrote a note in the margin of my spreadsheet, compare later. The dread in my chest told me there'd be more where that came from. And I was right. The voicemail waiting for me at 3:11 a.m. wasn't a mistake. It was the first crack in a trap they'd been building for years. Thanksgiving in Oak Park always smelled like cinnamon and turkey fat. My parents' dining room glowed under its chandelier-polished silverware lined neatly beside plates of mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce. The warmth in the room was rehearsed a performance we all had roles in. Before the meal, Rowan cornered me on the back porch. The air was sharp, with late autumn cold leaves spinning like brittle coins around our feet. He leaned in close, his breath tinged with whiskey. "Just 2,000, he murmured. "New phone. I need it for the business. It'll pay itself back." I tightened my coat and said the word I'd never managed before. No. He blinked at me like I'd spoken a language he couldn't understand. "I can't," I added more firmly this time. "If you show me proof of steady income, maybe we can talk repayment. But no more handouts." At dinner, Dad raised his glass, his eyes flicking to me. "Promotion looks good on you, son. You must be swimming in it now." His voice had that teasing edge that cut deeper than a direct insult. Mom always softer, but not softer on me, sighed. "Don't be so harsh, Qley. He's trying. You remember what it's like starting out?" I stared at my plate, carving lines through the gravy with my fork. Instead of answering, I opened my phone under the table and typed a note. Recording the exchange became instinct, like an insurance policy, against the gaslighting I knew would follow. Later in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hands wet from soap and grease, Ren leaned closer as we stacked plates. "Rowan skipped a payment with his guy," she whispered without thinking. "He needs cash bad." Then her eyes widened as if she wished she could swallow the words back down. I nodded. Once you were, quiet, confirmation of what I already suspected. The new phone was nothing more than camouflage for another debt. That night back in my studio, I began what I would later call the ledger of truth. Every dollar, every text, every excuse. Screenshots, receipts, voicemail transcripts. I created folders by name: Dad, Mom, Rowan, even Ren. Anything without documentation I marked in red. I printed what mattered most and slid the pages into a clear plastic file, the kind accountants used. Transparency as armor. Scrolling back through October's statements, one entry froze me. Utilities, $1, $200. Except when I cross-checked, the Oak Park electric bill was only $280. The rest had been redirected to pay down a gambling debt. Someone had altered the transaction label before it reached the shared record. My chest tightened. They weren't just asking. They were rewriting the truth to fit their story. And then there was the voicemail from my mom, half asleep, almost whispering. I gave Rowan the password. It was urgent. Your father said it was the only way. Her voice cracked. Please don't be angry. Hearing it was like the floor beneath me splitting open. It wasn't just them pulling. It was her handing them the rope. Pity and betrayal wrestled inside me. I thought of her heart medication, the late nights I'd spent crunching overtime hours so she'd never run out. And yet, when pushed, she chose their side over my boundaries. I sent Dad a message before I went to bed. For the first time, I set the rule in writing. From now on, every request needs proof. Every dollar requires paperwork. I watched the word "seen" appear beneath it, glowing blue. No reply. Just silence, the kind that carries more weight than an argument. At 1:02 a.m., my phone pinged with a bank alert. A request to update a co-authorizer is pending. The notification showed a blurred-out name, only enough to demand I log in for details. My thumb hovered over the login button. My pulse drummed. Behind that blurred square waited something that could unravel everything. July nights in Wicker Park carry a different weight, humid, heavy, pressing against the skin. My apartment windows were open, but useless, the air conditioner buzzing while the CTA rumbled in the distance. At midnight, I sat at my desk, the blue glow of the laptop casting a pall over the room. I clicked into the bank portal, my stomach knotted tight. There it was in sharp letters, new co-authorizer, Rowan Rise Ventures, LLC, underneath an electronic signature. My name. My handwriting. Except it wasn't. I downloaded the PDF. My breath slowed as I scanned the page. The signature matched the forged scan I'd once found buried in an old email. They had carried it forward, planting me as if I were part of their scheme. My mother's late-night confession came back in full color. I gave him the password. Your father insisted. I dialed my dad's number. He answered on the second ring. Qley, he said, too fast, too nervous. Explain this, I demanded, reading the line with my name aloud. A long pause, then his voice cracked. It's just paperwork, son. Easier for the bank to let us move funds around. Don't make this bigger than it is. But his words were already the size of a wrecking ball. I didn't argue. I let silence fill the line until he stammered, "We'll talk later," and hung up. By 2 a.m, I had printed every page, slid them into the growing binder labeled The Ledger of Truth. It wasn't just theft, now it was identity. They weren't only using my money, they were turning me into a co-signer, a silent partner in something I never agreed to. I dug into my email archives again. Log records showed repeated sign-ins from IP addresses in Oak Park. Not just Rowan, not just Dad, the whole house. Buried in my spam folder was another bank email dated a month earlier. Your update has been processed successfully. I never approved anything. Someone had answered in my name. When I checked the permissions on my old drive folder, the one with the 2020 CC fund contract, I saw multiple downloads from Ren's device. My cousin, who had slipped secrets in the kitchen at Thanksgiving, had clearly played a hand, too. Then I replayed a voicemail Rowan had left slurred with overconfidence. "Don't delete the signature, man, we need it for the next step." He spoke like it was already his, like I was no longer me, just a tool in his pocket. The last piece landed like a stone record showing Rowan Rise Ventures LLC had been filed almost 2 years earlier. And there, under partnership members, my name sat quietly tagged as silent partner. They had written me into their story, whether I spoke or not. The choices thrashed in my mind. Stay quiet, gather more proof, risk being dragged into their debts. Or act now and know that once I did, there'd be no going back. Bloodlines don't forgive exposure. At 3:10, I opened a new draft. I did not authorize this signature. "This is forgery. I request immediate internal investigation." I hit send. The click felt like a gavel cracking against wood. Seconds later, my phone lit up with a new text from an unknown number. "You just ruined everything. Get ready to face what's coming." The room went still, the hum of the AC louder than my own breath. The city outside kept moving, but in that moment I knew I had stepped out of their script. And nothing about our family would ever look the same again. Ren scheduled it for Sunday afternoon and titled the invite "Family Meeting" as if putting a bow on it might make it less like a trial. When I logged in, the screen split into living portraits, Dad pacing with his phone clenched white in his fist. Mom angled down so only her mouth and chin showed Rowan with red eyes and a jaw already set to fight Aunt Sylvia with arms crossed like a gate. Uncle Malcolm, a quiet square of shadow behind her. Dad started without, "Hello." "You went too far," he said, eyes sliding across his camera. "The account's frozen. They're threatening to cut our power. Your mother's prescriptions can't be filled this week. You think this is how you treat family?" Rowan leaned into his mic. "You abandoned us. You're selfish." I clicked share screen and brought up the spreadsheet. The grid filled their displays, tidy rows that had cost me sleep and pride. "This is $103,742.19, I said. 6 years. Hospital bills, utilities, cash transfers, casino debts disguised as household expenses." I scrolled. 15,000 to Northwestern Memorial. 5,000 to Rivers Casino. 1,200 labeled electric. The month the actual bill was $280. Then I looked up. "Is this what you call selfish?" Mom's breath came fast. "You keep records of everything. You're watching us. I'm keeping record of me," I said. "Without this, I drown in a story you keep rewriting." Sylvia cut in from her square voice, smooth. "You have to understand, family comes first. Family doesn't mean I erase myself to be a wallet," I said. "Family doesn't mean you forge my name." Rowan slammed his hand on a table out of frame. The camera shook. "If you cancel the loan, the whole plan falls apart." The sentence tripped out unguarded, then hung there, a flare lighting the whole scene. Silence spread. Every square went still. I let it sit, then asked which plan. Rowan Rise Ventures. Dad's face hardened. "Don't throw around terms you don't understand." I switched windows and opened the PDF. My name curved in a signature I didn't write, stared back at all of us. "I understand this, I said. I didn't sign it. It matches a scan used to attach me to an entity I never agreed to join." Dad shook his head, but his fingers trembled. "It's just how banks work. We needed flexibility." "And you all," I said to Ren. Changing screens to the access logs downloaded my 2020 contract from my drive 3 times last month. "You told me in the kitchen last Thanksgiving that Rowan owed someone and needed cash. This wasn't flexibility. This was engineering." Ren swallowed. "I was checking it for Aunt Viv. That's all." I pulled one last email forward, letting the subject line fill their screens. "Pending disbursement $90,000. Co-authorizer confirmation required." If this money lands, I said, I'm on the hook, not hypothetically. Legally. Mom's eyes finally met the camera. 90,000. Her voice barely made it past her lips. "I called the bank," I said. "I called their fraud line. I called a lawyer. Dad took a step closer to his camera face filling the frame. You would do this to your own parents. I'm done doing this to myself, I said. From today, all joint accounts and shared cards are closed, auto pays are canceled, I've retained counsel. I am not your bank anymore. Rowan lunged at the screen as if he could climb through it. You think you can walk away? You think you get to leave us holding nothing, Rowan Sylvia hissed, but he rolled over her. I carried you, I said, voice steady. I carried everyone. I'm putting you down before you break me. For a second, the room full of tiny rectangles felt like a house finally admitting the cracks in its walls. The veneer peeled back to plaster, then to bare studs. End this call, Sylvia said sharply, reaching out of frame. As the screen began to shrink, I heard Rowan's voice tinny and distant through the exit chime. We'll make him pay. If he doesn't fold, we all go down. Then the meeting dissolved, leaving my own face reflected in black glass. On Monday, the light in my office was blinding July sun, striking the loop's glass and ricocheting into a white glare. It didn't make what I read any cleaner. The email subject line was clinical application denied, suspected fraud, $90,000, Rowan Rise Ventures, LLC. I opened the attachments. The application listed me as co-owner, my electronic signature affixed beneath terms I'd never seen my parents as guarantors. It was meticulous, as if they'd practiced. I walked to the nearest branch with the printouts in a manila folder. The banker, a woman with a calm voice and wary eyes, met me in a small glass room. She scrolled through internal notes, her mouth tightening. The request was submitted from a device geolocated to Oak Park, she said. There were multiple password resets in the last 18 months, and there is a recorded call confirming consent in your name. I was in a staff meeting at that time, I said. There's a calendar and 12 witnesses. She nodded. Our fraud team flagged the voice as inconsistent with your profile. But it was close. She paused. I'm sorry. On the train back to the office, I pulled up old statements and chased the thread of RR. Fintingers. Sewer, seerses. The dealer. Charges went back to 2022, recurring fees that now read like rent for a shell. The pattern unfolded with a cold logic: build the structure around me, move the money through it, keep me quiet with shame, and the promise that it was all for family. I called my mother and asked her to meet me in the lobby. She arrived with a stack of papers held to her chest like a shield. Her eyes were red. You cut the fun, she said before I could speak. Your father is sleeping on the couch. Rowan is being pushed out by his landlord. Can't you show mercy for once? I led her to a quiet corner and laid the application on the table. Did you sign this? She studied the lines, the places where her name intersected with mine. He said it was paperwork, she whispered. He said it was nothing. It's not nothing, I said. It makes me responsible for a debt that will never be repaid. I slid another sheet forward, and this form ties me to the company as a founding member. Filed 2 years ago, while I was in Minneapolis on a work trip. She closed her eyes. Your uncle said everyone would benefit if we just got through a few months. At whose expense, I asked. Every month I've given you was bought with my life. Her tears came then soft and quiet, and I felt the old reflex rise in me, the urge to fix, to shoulder, to forgive. I swallowed it down. Mercy without boundaries had built this whole trap. Back upstairs, a voicemail waited from the branch manager. There was also a phone authorization, she said. The caller passed basic verification. Someone imitated me, I told my lawyer when I got him on the line. They had my details. They used my name. Then we act, he said. We submit an affidavit for identity theft to the bank, the police, and the IRS. We lock your credit. We freeze every vector they could use. Document everything. No private contact. I signed on his tablet in his office that afternoon, the pen scratching across the glass as if etching a line I wished I'd drawn years earlier. On the way out, a text pinged from an unknown number. Leave it alone. Reopen the fund. Pretend you didn't see a thing. Otherwise, everything explodes, and you lose it all. By evening, I was back in my apartment, the city glowing outside like a circuit board. I made copies of everything, statements, logs, emails, screenshots, and saved them to an encrypted drive. I labeled a physical binder for law enforcement and tucked it into the office safe the next morning. 2 days later, the bank confirmed in writing that all links between me and Rowan Rise Ventures were severed, that access inherited through the emergency fund had been revoked, that my profile was flagged for additional verification on any future changes. The relief was real, but it had edges. Relief like a tourniquet. It stops the bleeding, but the limb still throbs. That same afternoon, my building's hallway camera caught a figure lingering at my door, baseball cap pulled low, shoulders hunched. I didn't open. When I finally cracked the door an hour later, a plain envelope slid on the mat, weighted like a trap. I picked it up with 2 fingers and opened it under the kitchen light. One line in block letters, "Stop if you want to stay safe." I stood at the sink with the note between my hands, the paper going limp under the steam from the kettle. Fear is a practical thing. It tells you to run to fold, to put your head down and accept the humiliation you know. But something steadier had taken root in me since that night I closed the fund. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pride. It was the simple, stubborn belief that my name belonged to me. I texted my lawyer a photo of the note, then emailed building management to pull the footage. I forwarded everything to the detective on my case. When my phone lit with calls after midnight numbers I didn't recognize. Numbers I knew too well, I let them ring. The AC rattled, the CTA sighed past, and I sat at my desk with the binder open, adding the envelope to a new section labeled simply Threats. Morning peeled across the city in white stripes of light. I brewed coffee, buttoned a clean shirt, and carried the binder to work like armor. The trap had been set for years, designed to close without a sound. It had closed around me more than once. But this time, I had documented the hinges. This time I knew exactly where to push. The scrap of paper slid under my door, stayed on my desk for hours. I kept reading the same words, short-scrawled, menacing. My stomach churned as if the letters themselves carried poison. The studio felt smaller than ever, boxed in by the hum of the fan and the glow of my laptop. I walked next door and knocked, asking my neighbor if they had seen anyone. She said there had been a man lingering in the hall, middle-aged, nervous pacing for almost 20 minutes before vanishing down the stairwell. Minutes later, my phone rang. Rowan's name pulsed on the screen. I answered, and his voice burst out like a fist through glass. "You went to the police. You filed reports. Do you want to destroy your own family?" His tone pitched between rage and panic. I held the phone away from my ear, listening but refusing to respond. Silence was my only armor. When I hung up, another message appeared in my inbox, supposedly from the bank. It urged me to cancel all complaints to protect your personal funds. The sender line was off the link, clumsy. It was a phishing attempt, poorly disguised, but clear enough someone wanted me to back down. My chest tightened. I called my attorney immediately. His voice was calm, clipped, steady. "Do not delete anything. Save every voicemail, every email, every scrap of paper. Create copies, and above all, do not meet with any of them alone." His words carried the weight of inevitability. The next morning, on my way to the office, I spotted a green sedan parked along the curb, the same model Rowan used to drive. Its windows were tinted, but I recognized the dent on the rear bumper. I pulled out my phone and recorded the car, narrating the date, time, and location. Documentation had become my lifeline. Later that day, the attorney told me something that lodged like ice under my skin. If I could not prove within weeks that the loan applications were fraudulent, the court could assume my consent by default. The clock was ticking. That night, I played an old voicemail from my father. In the background, I heard my Aunt Sylvia whisper, "We have to make him release the money. Otherwise, we're all drowning." The betrayal wasn't a surprise anymore, yet the sound of her voice made my hands tremble. I dug deeper into RR Ventures, uncovering invoices tied to a shell company registered in Florida. Its address linked to a crypto scam. The realization cut through me. Even if money had been secured, it would have vanished into a black hole. As I was sifting through these documents, a message blinked on my phone. It was from Harper Rowan's ex-girlfriend. He bragged he's about to score big money from you. I thought you should know. My breath caught. Someone outside the family had confirmed what I already feared. I stood at the crossroads of blood and justice, knowing whichever way I stepped, something would shatter. Love had always been my weak tether, but reason told me the rope had already burned away. Before bed, I transferred all evidence onto a USB drive, placed it in the office safe, and emailed a copy to my attorney. Choosing to preserve my safety over silence was not a victory. It was survival. Near midnight, my phone lit with 5 missed calls from my mother. I listened to her final voicemail. "Please don't do this. You'll regret it." Her voice was frayed, breaking, yet there was no comfort in it, only a warning soaked in fear. I set the phone face down and stared at the ceiling, the fan's shadow slicing across the plaster like a blade. Saturday afternoon, the small conference room at my attorney's office felt heavier than a courtroom. My father sat rigid, my mother pale, Rowan restless, Sylvia with her arms folded tight, Malcolm stone-faced, Wren avoiding my gaze. The attorney spoke first, measured and precise. "We are here to address allegations of identity fraud involving RR Ventures." I slid a folder across the table, opening it so every sheet fanned out like evidence at trial. Bank statements, PDFs with forged signatures, email records tracing logins to Oak Park, screenshots of phishing messages, the video of the green sedan, and, finally, Harper's text message. Each piece landed like a stone on water, the ripples filling the silence. Rowan shouted, "He's making this up." His voice cracked, desperation bleeding through. I pressed play on my phone, letting his own words fill the room. "If you cancel the loan, the plan collapses." The sound replayed twice, undeniable. The room went still. I turned to my father. "Who called the bank pretending to be me?" He avoided my eyes, lips tight. Sylvia exhaled sharply and said we were just trying to keep the family from falling apart. Her confession was both brittle and brazen. My mother broke down. "We only wanted a chance," she sobbed. I felt my throat tighten, but I answered evenly. "A chance cannot be built on lies. And my name." The attorney cleared his throat. "Given this record, we're moving into criminal territory. Forgery, attempted fraud, conspiracy. The authorities will pursue this if my client wishes." His words pressed the air into lead. I produced one last document, the state registration papers showing me as a founding member of the LLC in 2022. At that time, I had been working in Minneapolis. I placed the page in front of them. This is not just bending the truth. It is manufacturing an identity I never lived. Wren finally spoke, voice trembling. Sylvia asked me to download the files. I didn't think it meant stealing. Her eyes begged for absolution, but my reply was steady. "Whether you thought or not, you crossed the line." The attorney added, "If he hadn't spoken up, future loans could have tied him to hundreds of thousands of dollars. That is the magnitude of what you were willing to risk." As if on cue, his computer pinged. He opened an email from the bank, another loan request under RR Ventures. This one for $50,000 had just been denied. Even with all eyes on them, they had tried again. I looked at each face. My father, rigid with shame. My mother drowning in tears. Rowan, shaking with fury. For the first time, my chest felt lighter. The weight was not mine anymore. "I am ending all financial ties," I said, voice clear, final. "From this moment, I am not your bank, not your safety net. If the law takes this further, I will not stand in its way. I choose my freedom." I stood, gathered nothing, and walked toward the door. Behind me, the rustle of papers and muffled sobs filled the room. Rowan's voice followed me into the hall, sharp and venomous. "You'll never escape." Blood doesn't let you go." His words echoed against the sterile walls, clinging like smoke. I did not turn back. For the first time in years, my footsteps carried only my own weight. That night after the confrontation at my lawyer's office, I walked through the city streets feeling like I had stepped out of one life and into another. The air was heavy, the kind that sticks to your skin. But for the first time in years, I could breathe without the weight of someone else's debt pressing on my chest. I kept replaying Rowan's words in my head, his threat about blood never letting me go. It lingered like a curse. But I knew I had already broken free. The following week, everything moved fast. My lawyer filed the affidavits, the bank submitted the fraud report, and the police opened a case. For once, the narrative wasn't theirs. It was mine, and it was backed by evidence no one could twist or drown in crocodile tears. The house of cards they had built on my name started collapsing the moment investigators reached out. Rowan tried to call me dozens of times, leaving voice messages that swung from rage to begging. One night he screamed that I had ruined his life. The next morning he sobbed that he would end everything if I didn't withdraw the complaint. But I didn't answer. I couldn't. I had spent years as their safety net, and now I realized that every rope I had given them had been tied into a noose around my own neck. When the subpoenas landed, their voices changed. The family group chat, once filled with endless demands, went silent. My father, who had always carried himself like a commander, left me one last voicemail. His voice was hoarse, almost broken. "You've chosen your path. Don't expect to come back when you realize what family means." But I didn't need to come back. I finally understood that love isn't proven by how much pain you can carry for someone else. The day I signed the final documents to dissolve every joint account and freeze my liability, I walked out of the bank into the sharp light of afternoon. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. They trembled because for the first time I wasn't carrying anyone else's lies or failures. I was carrying only myself. That evening I returned to my apartment, and for once it didn't feel like a hiding place. It felt like home. I poured a glass of water, sat by the window, and let the city hum around me. The phone was silent. No buzzing, no pleading, no demands. Just silence, clean and whole. I know people will ask if I regret it. If I regret choosing truth over blood, freedom over loyalty. My answer is no. Regret is what kept me chained for years, and walking away wasn't betrayal. It was survival. Family had turned into a courtroom, a battlefield, and a scam. I couldn't fix them, and I finally stopped trying. What I could fix was the way I allowed myself to be treated. That was the inheritance I chose: dignity, freedom, and the right to decide where my life goes next. So when Rowan's curse echoes in my head, I remind myself, blood may tie you, but it doesn't own you. I walked away alive with my name intact, and that is more than they will ever have. And with that, the story I carried like a wound becomes something else. Not just survival. Not just escape. But the beginning of a life I can finally call